live. Got that one going. Welcome everybody. Just a few seconds, we'll kick things off. Just waiting for the internet to spool up so that we can get things going. All right, here we go. And we're up, we're running, we're streaming. Happy Monday, everyone. And I have no April Fool's joke for you today, so everything's serious, no jokes. Normally back in the past, I would do a blog post about some crazy new Adobe thing or Apple thing or whatever. And this year I failed miserably. I did not come up with an April Fool's joke. So today's just photography tips, Lightroom and Photoshop. All right, so I see some folks coming into the room. Whale Ben, Victoria, Mikey, Glenn, who else here? Adolf. Welcome everyone. And I see Rod, Ahmad, Larry, Colleen, Joseph. Welcome everyone on YouTube as well. So all the way from Germany and Egypt and South Africa. Great to have so many people here from around the world. This will be a quick one. If you've been following my streams, you know that I typically do an InDesign Tuesday, and I've been trying to think like, do I need any other days that remain consistent? So I'm thinking about turning Mondays into Photography Mondays. We'll see if that goes. But for this week, it will be a Photography Monday. We're going to talk about some Lightroom and Photoshop and some just quick tips to make your photos look better. All right, so with that said, let's jump into it. I'm going to switch over to my computer. Let's make sure I'm in the right place first before I expose it to the world. There we go. All right. All right, so I've got Lightroom Classic open, and you will see me from time to time do tips in Lightroom Classic and tips in Lightroom CC, and for the most part, the tips I do will work in either application. I think what I'm going to be doing here today will work in either application, so it doesn't really matter which version of Lightroom you're using, whether it's Classic or the newer cloud-based CC version. And of course, Photoshop's Photoshop. So I have a couple portraits here that were taken in studio. I have a lot of portraits here that are taken in studio, but we're going to concentrate on two of the ones up top with this guy that I photographed years ago, and it actually became one of my best-selling portraits on Adobe stock. It was actually this one. So let's zoom out, that one. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of a couple tips and tricks, because these are the actual original images without any retouching. And I'm just going to show you some things that I would do today that maybe I didn't do back then, or today I would do just in general with these couple pictures. So first, let's start with the one where he's full length standing. And I'm in Lightroom, which is where my images usually go first. I either shoot tethered right into Lightroom Classic, which that you cannot do on Lightroom CC as of yet, or I would import them, and of course you can import them into either one. And I can see a couple problems right off the bat with this image. Number one, if I look at the histogram on this image, I can see there's a lot of data in the dark areas of the image. It's kind of not that well lit. It's okay. He's wearing a black jacket, black jeans, black shoes. So there's a lot of dark areas. And also there's this, looks like the part of the softbox is showing there. I can look at the floor and I can see there's scuff marks on the floor. So the floor wasn't pristine that day. Just lots of little things that I would want to clean up first. But the first thing I want to do is adjust some standard adjustments I would do to any photo, and then some adjustments I would do to this particular photo, which is technically just too dark, especially in the shadow areas. So I would go in and first and foremost, head over to the Develop module, and let me answer one question right off the bat. Well, could you do this all in Photoshop? Yes. The answer is absolutely yes. Everything I'm going to show you that I'm doing in Lightroom, I could just do it all in Photoshop because I'm going to go to Photoshop anyway. Why do I then do it in Lightroom first if Photoshop can do everything I'm going to do? Because the things I like to do in Lightroom, I'll do as much as I can in Lightroom first because it's non-destructive. So if I ever want to make any changes to the original, I haven't really affected the original. I can come back in and make those changes in Lightroom. Once I head over to Photoshop, then I am making changes to the pixels. I'm making, in some cases, destructive changes. And therefore, I still have the original photo, but those are like kind of the finishing touches. So I do as much as I can in Lightroom first. Then whatever I can't do or doesn't do as well in Lightroom, that's when I have it over Photoshop. Do I always go to Photoshop? No, because if Lightroom can do everything I need to do, there's no reason to go to Photoshop. So I only go to Photoshop for the stuff I have to. All right, so with that said, one of the things I do right off the bat to a photo is adjust for lens correction. And I would normally do this now upon import. And of course, if you have one of the new mirrorless cameras, they do lens correction right in the body of the camera. So my Nikon Z6, for example, I don't need to do this because it does it in the camera. But since this was one of my older cameras, I'll enable that profile correction. And you'll see a slight difference when I do this. See how it adjusted? He's maybe got it even a little taller because it took some of the bending and bowing out of that photo to adjust it accordingly. And it picked what camera, lens, and combination and what profile it needed to use based on the EXIF data in the photo. So the data in the photo told it, hey, this was shot with a Nikon blank with a Nikon blank lens, and therefore the adjustment needs to be made accordingly. So I would do that right off the bat to all the photos. Next up, I would make a profile correction. And this is something I didn't have back when I shot this. There was no Adobe profiles. So since this is a raw image, I get to choose a raw profile. I usually either use portrait or portrait or vivid for my portraits. Of course, landscape or vivid for landscapes. I like vivid because I like vivid colors, but there's not a whole lot of vivid color to work with in this photo, so portrait will do me just fine. Now, it's not going to make a tremendous difference. When I click it, yeah, we don't even see anything. Those are just subtle differences to get you going, to get you started. Next up, I would, and by the way, if I, here, let me undo that for a second. Let me undo that. So, for example, one difference you might be able to see that it made, let me go all the way back. Reset, okay. Yeah, it's not showing it here as much as I want it to. Never mind. I was going to show you something about the dark areas in this photo. Maybe if I do it a little bit more extreme. There we go. When you hover over the highlight warning or the shadow warning in this case, everything that turns blue is letting me know that everything in that photo is too dark. You're losing all detail in that particular area of the photo. So what I would typically do as an adjustment is I would start adjusting the black slider in this case to adjust for that. Now, let's go back and redo the things we just did. So let's go back to lens correction. I was just showing you that example, but once I made all these corrections, I didn't have that much of an example to show you. All right, let's go back to portrait. And then let's go to, and again, let's reset that black slider. There we go, that's where we were. And you can see that it changed from white to blue, which means there's a little bit of it left, but not a ton. So if I hover over it, I don't even see the blue in this photo, so there's really not anything to worry about. Next up, I would then go in, and nowadays I would try auto, because auto is usually going to get me most of the way there. It gives me, again, a better starting point. So first of all, lens correction. Second of all, profile for the raw file. Third of all, auto, to kind of move the sliders so that I don't always have to start from scratch on every single slider. So let's hit auto, and I don't agree with the sliders all the time. So I hit auto, that definitely lightened up the photo, definitely brought out some detail. We can now see the texture in his jeans. It kind of did all that work for me. But again, I don't like everything it did. So for example, it really did crunch down some more of the blacks. So you can see them under his arm in the jacket there. You can see them in that area right over here when I hover over the blue. And I have to decide if that area is important or not. If it's not, I could leave it the way it is, or I could make that adjustment for me. Or I could do it myself, I should say. So first adjustment I would disagree with. And this is the one, if you heard me do this before, I always disagree with contrast, because in my case, it usually lowers the contrast. I don't like lower contrast. So I'm going to double click to reset that back to 0. The next thing it does a lot of, and I'm okay with it on landscapes, but I'm not okay with it on portraits, is I don't want the saturation increased on portraits. So the opposite. It decreased the contrast. I put it back to 0. It increased the saturation. I'm going to double click and put it back to 0. Why? Because saturation is great for everything except people, cars, landscapes, flowers, whatever else it is. Saturation's awesome. It makes the colors more punchy. But what saturation can do to people is it can make the skin unnaturally more saturated. That's what vibrance is for. Vibrance is for making skin tone, making the photo better without affecting the skin tones. So it pumped up the vibrance to 18. That might be a little more than I would want. So, and again, he's not wearing a lot of color, so there's not a whole lot to make more vibrant. So that one I could probably drop back down to 0 as well. If he was wearing a yellow shirt on a blue background, yeah, I'd leave the vibrance up. But there's just, most of this is black and white. There's not a lot going on there. All right, so the next thing I would look at is, again, that slider and say, okay, if I zoom in on this area, do I care that there's no detail in here? Nah, I really don't. But if I did want to make the adjustment, I would do it from the histogram, because that will let me do it interactively and let me see when that triangle goes empty. So when I pull this to the right and it goes blank, then I know there's detail now in here that didn't used to be. So I didn't go over far enough. There we go. All right, so again, not going to make a huge difference. And if it did, if it started messing up his skin or messing up other things, then I would pull back on the blacks. All right, so that is, in a nutshell, the things I would absolutely do to this photo in Lightroom. If I didn't care about the headspace, then I might just crop this little thing out of here. But since I'm going to Photoshop anyway, because there's some other things I want to do, I'll just take that out in Photoshop. But just so you know, if I were trying to deliver this out of Lightroom and I didn't want to go to Photoshop, then I would have to either try and remove it with a spot healing tool or crop it out. So let's try both. Even though, like I said, I'm going to get rid of it in Photoshop anyway. So I could try the spot removal, and that probably will do an okay job in this case because it doesn't have anything really to compete with up there. And yeah, it did an okay job. That worked. So I didn't have to crop it to get rid of it. And again, that's non-destructive. So if I want it back for any reason, I can come back to that adjustment, click on it, and delete the adjustment, and I get back that data. Because in Lightroom, it's always non-destructive. It's never really wrecking or hurting the photo. All right. So again, with that said, I don't mind it. So I'll go ahead and leave it in this case, and it will do its thing. Okay. Now, could I do that on the floor? Could I move down here and start adjusting all these little specks, all these little spots here? Yeah, but it would take a lot longer. So that's one of those things that, like I said, I would go to Photoshop to do. All right, let's get out of that tool. All right, I think I'm ready. So with that said, you can either do it from the develop module. I usually go back to the grid and I would right click or just Command E or Control E and say edit in Photoshop. Once I do that, that should take a copy of the image, again, because it doesn't ever write over the raw file. So it should take a copy of the image over to Photoshop, and let's see if it did that. Yeah, there it is. So we're in Photoshop, ready to go. So whatever I do here, I still have the original with my Lightroom adjustments. So I'm never getting rid of the original. I'm never doing anything with the original. Rose, thanks for tuning in. All right, so with that said, now what am I going to do? So I hadn't zoomed in on him in the photo. I zoomed in on the background. And this is where I would now go in and make a couple of adjustments. Like, for example, he's got a little white speck of whatever that is on his collar. Don't need that. It's not really helping the photo. So that's a quick, easy spot healing tool. Before I start working, the question I always get is, well, shouldn't you make a copy of the layer before you do anything? And I'm never going to say, no, you shouldn't. I'll say, no, I don't. Because what you're really saying is, I want to make a copy just in case I mess something up. I'll have the original background to get back to. Well, keep that in mind that I have the original to get back to. I have the original raw file. that I can get back to that doesn't have any changes no matter what I do in Photoshop. That's why I don't make the extra copy. But for everyone else that thinks you should or need to, I'm not going to argue with you. All you would do then in that case is duplicate the layer, and now you're working on a copy. Now you got your safety net. In case you do something wrong, you have the original underneath. I have my original back in Lightroom. That's why I don't do it. All right, so anyway, let's go in and let's do that one little thing there. Okay, we got rid of that little speck, his skin is okay. There's a couple blemishes up here that I might want to go ahead and take care of. Maybe things that, like pimples, things that aren't permanent, that would be gone in a couple weeks, are usually candidates of things to go. That's like a birthmark or dark spot there. I could get rid of it or not. It's up to me or my client. In this case, I am going to get rid of that and just take that out. So I'm using the spot healing brush and just get rid of that little reflection in his glasses there. The spot healing brush to take care of those things. Now, I was like, what is this? Oh, it's Ray-Ban. That's the logo for the glasses. So the Ray-Ban is fine. I don't mind keeping that there. But if I were going to put this on stock, then I can't have any branding. So I would have to get rid of this logo if I were going to use this image on stock. Now, that was a bad retouch, but we can fix that. There we go. All right, we can take that out. All right. Next up, I'll just keep going down. As I've said before, I'm not a fan of necklines. I know we all have them. This is where our neck bends, but no one's ever said, hey, where are my necklines? You took them out of the photo, because we don't really notice them unless we look at a photo. You don't really notice them on a person. So I'll either take them out or reduce them. That's just a personal thing. You don't have to. That's just what I would do. All right, next up, let's come down here and zoom in. And I'm not going to clean the complete floor, but I will definitely get rid of some of the most egregious marks and scuff prints on the floor itself, things that I would find distracting if I were to zoom in on the floor, which most people aren't. There's a crease in the wall there. And just quickly going through all of those things that could be distracting in the photo. Now keep in mind, he's casting a shadow onto the floor. If that shadow wasn't there, I'd just easily patch the whole thing. But if I patch the whole thing, then I'm going to get rid of the shadow too. So I don't want to do that. All right. Now the other method you can use, I'm just going to show you another just quick Photoshop tip. Another method that you can use to kind of remove the dark spots on the floor is to paint them out, but using a painting mode that would do that for you. So for example, I could go into my paintbrush, grab the brush tool, make a smaller brush, of course, and set the blend mode of the brush from normal to lighten. What that says is if I sample the white of the floor, there we go, and I now paint, and I'm going to make the brush smaller, I'm now telling it to remove anything that's darker than that sample. So that's another quick way to not change the color of the floor, to not take away the shadow unless you paint into the shadow, but it lets me, and see if you don't use a soft brush, it's not going to blend well. So it's going to start to show it up there. And plus that color is probably, hang on, let's do it again. Plus that color is probably a different color than what I sampled down here. All right, so let's just go ahead and paint that out. And it's just, now you can get a really clean background just by painting out the color. So I can do the same thing up here, sample the slightly darker color and use that same technique. Oop, don't want to go that high. Use that same technique up here. So anything that's lighter will get replaced. Now, if it leaves that hard line, that hard shadow, I'm sorry, anything that's darker will get replaced. If it leaves that hard line or hard shadow, then I could just simply patch that out to blend that in. So I'll use the patch tool, blend that in. Ooh, did not do a good job here. Let's see. Oh, I'm making it worse. Hang on. Let's undo, 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 undo. Let's try it not to be so dramatic. Or maybe let's go the other way. Yeah, that's better. All right. So we can blend it back in. But if you want, you could paint out those bad areas just like I just did. So we'll grab the brush tool. Once again, sample the color down here, the white, and then just paint. It'll paint out anything that's darker than that white you just sampled. Don't want to go over there. Hold on, let's do it over here. Since there's shifts in the lighting, you have to be careful. You have to keep resampling. So over here is a darker color. Now I can do it over here. So just keep resampling until you get it the way you want. All right. So that would be one of the ways I would clean up this photo. And I see that I did not go over far enough over here. Hang on. I didn't go all the way to the edge of the photo. So we can do that. And then blend it in. Patch tool. And blend. There we go. I love the patch tool for blending things like a hard edge into what I need to be a soft edge. All right, the other thing that's bugging me about this particular portrait, and not so much on the pants as much as it is on the jacket itself, I don't like those wrinkles or bulges on the right-hand side of the jacket. So that's when I would do something like a Liquify, filter, Liquify. And using the warp tool, I'm just going to make a brush that's slightly bigger than the area I'm trying to warp. Maybe something like that. And then just push that in. I don't like those bulges sticking out on that side. And I can pull out, if I need to, pull the arm out to make it more even. There we go. Just reducing some of that obvious wrinkling in the jacket. Now, of course, the jacket's, it's a leather jacket. It's supposed to do that, but just looks cleaner when those edges are smoother. I could do the same thing down here in the pants, like down here in the cuffs especially, where they stick out a little too much. I can push those back in. All right. So, there you have it. And since we did make the duplicate, we can see our before and after. So there's our before, there's our after. You look at the floor, look at him, and things just get a little cleaner that way. All right, let's do one more. We're out of time, but let's do one more real quick. So if I don't want to keep that layer, I don't have to, I don't want to. But if you want to keep the layer, I'm going to save it, close it, and when I head back to Lightroom, it will put a copy right next, it will put the one I just did right next to the original. So here's the original one. Now that I'm looking at it, I'll probably go back in and take out some of the wrinkles in the t-shirt, but just simple things, just gone. Let's go in and do basic. Again, portrait or vivid. Portrait's fine in this case. I can really see all the stuff that I'm losing when I hover over the shadow warning. It's just showing me all that detail in blue that's being lost. But before I adjust for that, I'll hit auto. Auto did a good job of bringing back some of that, but not enough. So I'm just going to drag it over right on the histogram until that comes back. His eye is still not where I like it. But what I also don't like is the background looks kind of bluish, like it's not really the right white balance. So I'll grab my white balance slider right here in Lightroom. We'll click, and that will kind of tone it just a little bit better. Now you can always drag the slider if I wanted it to be a little warmer or a little cooler. I could do it either way, but I would say maybe just a tad bit warmer there, and away we go. All right, so now what do I do about just that eye is starting to come back, but what can I do to kind of bring it back a little bit more? Well, I could either use an adjustment brush and kind of paint it back in a little bit, just lighten up this whole right side of his face, just a little, or I could use the gradient filter and kind of lighten up that whole side of the photo so it doesn't drift so far into darkness. Well, let's try it either way. Let's try the adjustment brush first. Let's set it to exposure. It's already lightened a little bit. And let's just come right over here on the eye, kind of lighten that side of the face. All right, that will kind of do it, and I can always adjust from there. So I can say, well, I don't want to lighten it that much. Maybe something like that. Or you could go, of course, crazy the other way, just to let you know that you did do it. Maybe something around that neighborhood will be good. And I can also see that I overdid it down here on his neck. So I can hold down the Option key and paint out that white halo that I would have gotten had I not noticed it. So in other words, I don't want the white or the lightness to bleed out into the background. All right, so same thing, Command E or PC Control E, or right click on the photo and say edit in Photoshop. That will edit a copy. It will send a copy over there. And here it is in Photoshop now. So we're in Photoshop. Now I can go in and do the kinds of things that, again, Lightroom's not well suited for. For example, that eye looks a little bit even closed. It doesn't look like it's as open as the eye on the left. So I'm going to try a trick. But before we do that, let's duplicate the layer, just as our extra safety net for those that feel comfortable with that extra safety net. People freak out when you don't duplicate the layer. All right, and then next up, oh, I don't like that little white in his eye there. So just a couple quick adjustments there. And I want to try something. I don't know that this will work on this photo because it may be too dark, but let's try it. Filter, Liquify again. And this time we're going to go to Face Aware Liquify. So that's this area up here on the right-hand side. And I want to see if I can open up that eye just a little bit more. So we have left and right eye controls, which is great. I could make the eye bigger. I could make the height better. Okay, that's the height. Let's make the eye a little bit bigger there. Just trying to balance that eye out a little bit. All right, eye distance, everything else is good with the eye. Just made it a little bit bigger and a little bit tall. Well, actually, we probably don't even need taller now. And just so you can see what I'm doing here, hold on. In case you're missing that, let me zoom in on it. All right, here's where we were. Let's put them both back to 0. All right, so I took the eye size and just played with that slider. That's probably that. So in other words, you can kind of see what it's doing there. That's probably about too much, probably about there. And you can play with the height. Originally, I had raised it, and then I thought, well, maybe it should actually be a little bit lower. Just trying to get the eyes about the same. Okay. So once I do that, click OK. That will return the results. And again, before, after. Just open that eye up just a little bit. Now, the other thing that's kind of a like you don't want a dead eye is that if there's no catch light in the eye. So see how there's a hint of that softbox in the other eye? You can kind of see it over here, that little white spot. Well, this eye doesn't have it. And also this eye is kind of missing a pupil area too. So we can do a couple things here. We can just selectively brighten that lower part of the eye up, but that still won't give us the catch light. So I would probably go in and just grab something like the lasso. Nope, not the magic wand. Where's my lasso? Where's my lasso? There's my lasso. Grab my lasso. I'm just going to duplicate that catch light. So I'm just going to select it. Command J or PC Control J will put it on its own, put a copy of it on its own layer. I'll use my move tool and just move it over. There we go. So just give that eye a little bit more life, maybe move it up a little bit over to the left. I'm just using my arrow keys to move it. So we get the same catch light on the same side in both eyes. And I think that might give me enough of what I'm looking for. Yeah, that gives me enough. I don't need to lighten up the other eye. Just that catch light kind of brings some more life back to it. Of course, we can take the Ray-Ban back out. Some of the same things we already did. You get the idea. And one more thing. Let's go here and brush out that one little spot there on the jacket. All right. So just some simple things to look for, quick tips to look for on your image that you're doing your portrait. All right, let's see if I missed anything here. What did I press to resample? I pressed, we were talking about when I was using the paintbrush. When you're using the paintbrush, you want to resample, hold down your Option or Alt key. That'll give you your eyedropper temporarily. So eyedropper, sample, paint some more. Eyedropper, Option, sample, paint some more. And that way you'll get the new color, the new white to paint with. Oh yeah, there was a Ray-Ban on the side of the glasses. Good call there. So don't forget that Ray-Ban too. Although they probably can't make that one out, but if I need to take that one out, same process. I'd probably use the patch tool on that. Select it. Good call, good catch, and drag it over. So that's just debranding your photo. If you plan on using it on stock photography or marketing that photo and you're not allowed to use specific brands, you get rid of it that way. And same thing here. Now I could try just a Shift Delete, and that will use content aware fill. See what that does. Yeah, did a good job, except for that one little line that doesn't belong there anymore. And there we go. All right, so cool. Yes, CC can save you so much time. All right, and let's make sure I didn't miss anything glaring over here, and then we'll call it a day. All right, just shout outs from all the countries you guys are from. Great, and let's see if I missed anything over here. Yes, by all means, have all the layers you want. Don't use my minimalist layer approach. If you think you need more layers, you have more layers. All right. No, we will not allow non-Adobe members to like or rate comment. Wow, something changed. Terry J Photography is asking, when I share a collection from Lightroom, it will not allow non-Adobe members to rate, comment, or download the images. Has something changed? Nothing's changed. That's always been the case. If you need to rate, or if you wanted someone to be able to rate or mark or comment on a collection from Lightroom, they don't need to be a Creative Cloud member, but they need an Adobe ID. That's been the case since day one. You sign in with that Adobe ID, and then they can rate, comment, whatever, and then you also see who it's coming from. An Adobe ID is free to create, but that's always been the requirement. It's never not been the requirement. All right, what is the shortcut for the magic wand? I don't know, hover over it. W, I'm guessing. The magic wand is W. I guessed right. All right, so with that said, cheers everyone. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you on the next one. Bye everybody.